Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Smith, the Curriculum Coordinator for the BioNetwork Bioprocessing Center, and welcome to today's webinar, Window on the Workplace 2012. Our BioForum is scheduled to run from 10 a.m. until approximately 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Our panelists today are John Balchunas, the Workforce Development Director for Education and Training at the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, and Bruce Kaylos, the Program Manager for the Biotech Manufacturers Forum with NCBio. In just a moment, I'll turn it over to them and we'll begin today's BioForum. We'd like you to feel free to ask questions by typing them in the chat box located on the right side of the screen. I'll be keeping a record of each question that is submitted, and we'll have a time at the end of the presentation to address all of your questions. Thank you. We're excited to have all of you meeting with us today, and at this time, I'll turn it over to our panelists, John and Bruce.
All right. Well, thank you, Greg. So thanks to everybody who's joining in. I'd like to welcome you to the Window in the Workplace 2012 webinar. I'd first like to thank the North Carolina Community College Systems BioNetwork and BioForum for hosting us on this topic. I'd also specifically like to thank Greg Smith for helping us navigate all the logistical issues involved in pulling this off. He's really done a truly stellar job in coordinating the entire webinar development process from start to finish. I'm John Balchunas, the Director of Workforce Development for the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, and I'm also joined by Bruce Kaylos, who chairs the Biotech Manufacturers Forum. The BMF is a group organized by NCBio to encourage collaboration and discussion on issues of mutual importance across North Carolina's biomanufacturing companies. If you're not familiar with the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, although many of you may be, we are a state-funded, private, nonprofit focused on job creation within North Carolina by supporting the growth of the biotech industry. We're not a state agency. We are funded by the state, but we are a private nonprofit. Our focus is growing the biotech industry in North Carolina, and we do this in many ways, including the support of startup companies through grants and loans, by supporting promising research through grants, and by building the workforce pipeline by catalyzing education and workforce training programs at all educational levels, as well as keeping tabs on the workforce needs of the industry here in North Carolina. And so on that note, I'm happy to share some of the results that we've recently released in our Window in the Workplace 2012 report. This is a series of workforce assessments focused on the state's biomanufacturing cluster. The study was undertaken by the Biotech Center in collaboration with the local industry as well as NCBioImpact partners. If you're not familiar with NCBioImpact, I'll bring you up to speed shortly, but in a nutshell, it's an internationally recognized first-of-its-kind training program that combines the resources of the industry, of NCBio, which is the trade association, of the Biotech Center, along with the University of North Carolina system and the North Carolina Community College system. And so back in 2007, NCBioImpact related training programs were opening and beginning to enroll students, and local industry was beginning to utilize the programs for incumbent worker training. So to collect baseline data back then, we surveyed the companies. We collected information on sort of their employment demographics, their training needs, their challenges, their hiring practices. And this is back in sort of late 2007, early 2008. And we never published that data at that time. It's woven into the 2012 report. So then by 2011, the NCBioImpact programs had developed into well-attended courses, and they'd solidified strong relationships with many of the employers, and the students enrolled in the programs had begun entering the workforce. So in addition to being able to look at the growth and employment trends within the sector, we can now begin to assess the progress and impact of the programs and actually meeting industry's training needs. Before we look at that, I think we'll begin by looking at the biomanufacturing and pharmaceutical manufacturing cluster here in North Carolina. And from there, I'll turn it over to Bruce to provide a brief history of the cluster's involvement in workforce development initiatives here in the state. And so we'll talk about NCBioImpact, which was created in response to industry need. From there, we'll look at some of the ways in which we can evaluate and define programmatic success here in North Carolina, as well as looking at some of the emerging training and educational needs with respect to the cluster. So let's dive into North Carolina's biomanufacturing and pharmaceutical training cluster. And historically, North Carolina is strategically focused on the workforce needs of this cluster due to the potential for well-paying jobs that are attainable by individuals transitioning out of traditional manufacturing industries into better career opportunities. So early workforce assessment, research, and industry collaboration was in part catalyzed by the development of BioWork, which is a one-semester course that provided fundamental background knowledge for individuals interested in entering careers as process technicians. So that sort of provided some of the catalysts in getting industry to the table. But before we can dive further into this cluster, it's probably helpful to have a little bit better understanding of the broader bioscience community here in North Carolina. So North Carolina is home to, I guess, the third largest cluster of biotech companies in the nation, with over 500 companies and approximately 58,000 employees. And so the pie charts on the right break this cluster into research and development companies, clinical and contract research organizations, as well as the manufacturing companies. According to Battelle, the bioscience sector in North Carolina employed approximately 52,642 people in 2010. This represents an increase of 8,539 jobs from the 44,000 observed at the end of 2002. And the majority of this growth can be attributed to the clinical research organizations. Battelle indicates that the sector accounts for the bulk of industry growth nationwide. So together with a thriving cluster of R&D companies, North Carolina's CROs play a critical role in the entire spectrum of drug development, from early stage development and recruiting and for clinical trials to laboratory services, regulatory guidance and submission, and finally all the way through sales and marketing of products. So that's the bioscience sector as a whole. And if we want to focus just on the manufacturing companies and look at just the bioscience manufacturing, we can pull away, the rest of the pie. And by pulling away the rest of the pie, we're looking at about 22,000 employees. And while this is a good start in identifying the cluster, from a workforce development research perspective, it's also challenging because it's critical to ensure that the quote-unquote basket of companies, as we've always talked about it, has similar workforce needs. And while the above piece of pie includes most of the pharma and biomanufacturing companies in the state, it doesn't include all of them. Some of them self-identify as a research company or as, in a few cases, a contract research organization. And so not all the companies that do manufacturing are in that basket. In addition, it also includes a number of other manufacturing companies that, while relevant to the state's economic health, have different workforce needs and different workforce capabilities. And so those companies are not included in what we want to define as our basket. So for this reason, it's important that we focus on a shared workforce similarities in addition to just the company type and defining our study group. And so when we start talking about the biomanufacturing and pharmaceutical manufacturing cluster in North Carolina, we're defining a study group based on the company type, but then also, and more importantly, the workforce and technology similarities with respect to, one, the unit operations and processes they utilize, two, the technology or the requisite knowledge, skill, and competencies of the workforce, and three, the shared regulatory environment, namely they're all working under good manufacturing practices as regulated by the FDA and international agencies. And so when we do this, we emerge with a relatively narrowly defined study group that's been the focus of this, as well as previous workforce assessments that the Biotech Center has undertaken. And the study group currently consists of 54 companies engaged in production and manufacturing, with approximately 18,695 employees as of the third quarter in 2011. The companies fall into three subsectors, which we'll talk more about on the next couple slides. And as you can see from looking at the map, the companies are distributed across the state, with the greatest proportion of companies being located within the Research Triangle Park labor shed, although other groupings exist, including a notable pharmaceutical cluster in the Wilson area. Now, even in regions of the state without significant biomanufacturing activity, however, there are often unique assets that could support biomanufacturing growth into the future. Some of these related industries include chemical manufacturing, food manufacturing, biofuels, natural products, and brewing. And the microbreweries, for example, have really taken off in the western portion of the state, and I think North Carolina is home to the greatest concentration of microbreweries east of the Mississippi. So it's a growing area, and it's a similar technology, and so there's the potential to sort of leverage that workforce and knowledge base. These assets all help position North Carolina for future economic growth. And so to look a little bit more closely at each of the subsectors in particular, we can start with biomanufacturing. And biomanufacturing or bioprocessing is the use of living cells or organisms to make a product, or the processing of tissues or cells to extract and purify a particular biological molecule that's the desired product. So the earliest forms of bioprocessing were the fermentation processes used to make wine and beer, as well as bread and other foods. In these examples, it was the yeast and the other microorganisms that are doing the work. So these days, in looking at these companies, we're talking about Biogen Idec, Merck, Durham, Fujifilm Diosynth, Pfizer, Novozymes, Novartis, Medicago, among many others. They are making vaccines, proteins, injectable therapeutics, industrial enzymes, and biochemicals. It's an interdisciplinary field using aspects of chemical engineering, biochemistry, and microbiology, and it's also a rapidly expanding field. North Carolina is also home to a large number of traditional pharmaceutical manufacturing companies that synthesize or process small molecule drugs. For the purpose of this study, as well as past Biotech Center workforce assessments, only those sites that carry out chemical synthesis, formulation, and aseptic processing are included. Examples include ASI in Research Triangle Park, GlaxoSmithKline in Zebulon, and Baxter out in Marion. And finally, North Carolina is also home to a number of companies offering process development, analytical, and production services to the manufacturing sector. Examples include Metrics out in Greenville, which was recently acquired by the Australian-based Maine Pharma, as well as Catalent here in Morrisville. And while not included in this group, companies that provide clinical diagnostic services, such as LabCorp, are a valuable and growing part of the state's bioscience industry as well. And so these companies overall reflect the general trends of the pharmaceutical industry as a whole over the last few years. And so when we look at the growth of the sector, there's been a general move towards reducing manufacturing costs through increasing efficiency. And this has led to some downsizing among the companies. And in addition, the recent recession has slowed the industry growth across the board. But despite that, the study group has exhibited stronger growth than traditional manufacturing industries in North Carolina, growing on average at 2.2% between 2002 and 2011. The majority of this growth can be attributed to the state's biomanufacturers in particular, which showed 5.3% annual growth since 2002. During the same period, employment in manufacturing as a whole in the state decreased significantly. So while both traditional pharma and biomanufacturing growth has slowed, they are both still growing. And it's important to note that, citing the state's infrastructure, business climate, and workforce availability, some of the existing biomanufacturing companies have not only expanded their operations here in the state, but have also moved non-manufacturing operations to their sites here as well. And so since the addition of a single biomanufacturing or pharmaceutical manufacturing operation in North Carolina has the potential to bring 300 or 500 jobs to the state, it continues to be a critical part of statewide economic development success. And so with that in mind, we can look a little bit about what we're looking at in terms of future growth within this area. And so while predicting job growth is difficult, especially given the recent recession, we can estimate this in a few different ways. And first we can look at projected growth through 2014 using data reported by the companies. This is data that we get through survey responses, through on-site interviews with the companies, as well as through media reports. And based on these reports, North Carolina's biomanufacturers expect to add 1,213 jobs between now and 2014, which is an annual growth rate of 6.2%. Data was not available from the traditional pharmaceutical companies, so that's reporting just on the biomanufacturing companies. And second, we can also project growth rates into the future based on past performance and how the companies have grown since 2002. And given that we're in the middle of or emerging from or recovering from a recession, it's necessary to look at this past growth in a couple different ways, both just factoring in recent growth from, say, 2008 to 2011, as well as long-term growth from 2002 all the way until now. So using the lowest and highest estimates in these different ways of looking at sort of projected growth. The figure above shows projected ranges for future growth between now and 2014. So contributing to the bulk of this growth, the biomanufacturers can expect to continue to show comparatively stronger growth at an estimated average of 4.9% per year between now and 2014. And we can use this data to conclude overall that the study group will grow at an average rate of 1.8% per year between now and 2014, generating on average 342 jobs per year. And when we look at those job openings occur when new jobs are added and when existing positions become vacant, i.e. turnover. And while new jobs are important from an economic development perspective, all job openings are important from an educational perspective, since each job opening for entry-level position is an opportunity for a graduate to enter the industry. And we've always defined entry-level as a position that does not require prior experience in the industry. So by that definition, an entry-level position could require education spanning the gamut, anywhere from an associate degree to a PhD to a few continuing education classes after high school. So based on survey findings, we also know that the turnover is approximately 7.5%, and we know that approximately 35% of new job creation in the cluster will be entry level. So based on these assumptions, the figure and the table on this page summarizes a 3-year estimate for job openings within the study group based on the observed growth data conclusions. It's important to note that this only represents the number of job openings within the study group and doesn't account for job openings in the state's broader bioscience industry as a whole. And I mention that because while training and education programs were catalyzed by the needs of the biomanufacturing sector in particular, the graduates are well prepared for and seeking employment in many other sectors in the state, including the R&D companies, the CROs, the medical device companies. And so now that we're talking a little bit more about jobs, it's probably worth explaining how some of these companies are organized, the types of jobs available, and some of the hiring trends related to the education and experience that we're observing and speaking with the companies. Now, the majority of biomanufacturing and traditional pharma manufacturing companies' workforce is scientific and technical in nature. So we've not included the company's employees that are working in customer service, IT, and non-scientific and technical jobs in this pie chart. The figure summarizes the distribution of scientific and technical workforce across various functional areas. And despite the industry growth since 2002, the overall distribution of labor has changed very little since these percentages since 2002. So delving into a little bit more detail into each of these different areas and the different types of jobs within a given company, I often find it's helpful to categorize the jobs in terms of the work environment. And while not carved in stone, it's a helpful sort of methodology in looking at the different jobs as taking place either in a manufacturing or facility type environment, as in a laboratory environment, or in a predominantly office. So typically manufacturing is going to contain the bulk of the company's workforce, and included here are those employees and groups charged with engineering, managing and operating the production process. It includes upstream and downstream manufacturing, formulation, filling, packaging, as well as warehouse and material handling functions. And while the requisite education level has risen over time, companies rely on the full educational spectrum within manufacturing. Employees with less formal education are more apt to remain content in the manufacturing environment, lending stability to the internal workforce. Employees with BS degrees and manufacturing experience are often attractive candidates for internal promotion into other areas such as QC and QA. Also operating in the same facility environment are the engineering, plant operations, and facilities personnel. Manufacturing facilities are very complex, typically requiring a large workforce to design, engineer, install, and troubleshoot equipment, as well as to maintain the facility itself and the utility systems. Most of the engineering positions require a minimum of a BS degree in an engineering discipline such as chemical or mechanical engineering. With some jobs requiring an MS or PhD. Maintenance and instrumentation related positions generally require a high school or associate level education in addition to certificates with various types of industrial technology. So next, many of the personnel support the manufacturing operations through laboratory work. And these include personnel engaged in product development, research, process development, as well as quality control. Quality control personnel ensure that the quality of the product by sampling and assaying raw materials, intermediates, products, and the work environment as a whole throughout the manufacturing process to ensure sterility, purity, and conformance to specifications. Quality control technicians usually need an associate or bachelor's degree in chemistry or microbiology. More senior positions can require a master's or PhD. Entry-level QC positions are a common entry point for both associate and bachelor's degree graduates. So finally, the remainder of the personnel are what I like to call corporate scientific professionals. And while they may work in a manufacturing and laboratory environment daily as well, the bulk of their work is often conducted in an office or more corporate setting. A good example of this is quality assurance. These folks ensure the quality of the process by establishing, documenting, and reviewing standard operating procedures and batch records, as well as investigating and resolving issues and non-conforming events. As it takes knowledge of the industry to do this work, many have experience in the industry as a prerequisite, and a minimum of a BS degree. And so when we look at the overall educational profile of the industry, and we look at how that's shifted over time, that's reflected in these pie charts on this page. So the figures summarize the educational profile for the employees working at biomanufacturing companies in 2002 and 2008. The companies represented here account for more than 80% of the state's biomanufacturing workforce, so it provides a good solid view of the biomanufacturing sector and the educational profile and how that's shifted in these years. While not represented in this figure, traditional pharma companies will generally have a lower number of bachelor's and associate degree people and a greater proportion with a high school plus or high school education, although many of the same trends hold true in terms of a general increase in education across the board. Some of the noteworthy trends in looking at these two figures are that while the overall workforce grew 26%, the number of workers with no education beyond high school decreased by 27%. This is due to a number of factors, including employees aging out, as well as employers returning to school for additional continuing education or short courses. The number of non-degreed workers with additional education beyond high school diploma, which are reflected by the high school plus, increased more than threefold. This is likely the result of specialized continuing education short courses such as biowork and follow-on courses in subjects such as aseptic manufacturing offered through the community colleges in both open enrollment and customized industry training settings. And so that's been great to see the high school plus section of the workforce grow substantially, as well as the high school alone shrink. It's showing a general rise in education. Employees with 2- and 4-year degrees continue to constitute the largest proportion of the workforce. And while there's been a small increase in the number of proportion of BS degrees, it is interesting that there has not been an increase in the number of associate degree people in the study group companies. It's worth talking about this a little bit. So it's clear that industry values education and is striving towards a more educated workforce at all levels. Back in 2008, companies indicated that they wanted to see the educational profile of their workforce increase. Most of the companies have established programs to help personnel with gaining additional education, and many specifically wanted to see more degreed personnel with an associate or bachelor's degree, as well as a higher percentage of manufacturing and plant operations personnel pursuing advanced education. So while conversations with the same companies in 2011 indicated the same desires, discussions with recruiters, company personnel, and job seekers have also indicated that associate degrees are less competitive in the current job market. Associate degree programs equip students with considerable technical skill and operational knowledge related to both the laboratory and manufacturing operations. Employers have long recognized this as it lends stability. The associate degree candidates are less likely often to pursue career advancement outside of manufacturing, so it's a stable portion of the workforce. And companies have long respected the manual dexterity that a lot of the associate degree candidates have, even over bachelor's degrees, in terms of their ability to operate in a lab. However, there's a greater degree of variability among associate degree graduates in terms of professional skills and polish. So as a result, the candidates are often outcompeted by candidates with bachelor's degrees who are readily available in today's job market. So some of this is a factor of the current economy. But for this reason, it's ever more critical that educational institutions, students, and new graduates lacking industry experience seek out every opportunity they can to further polish and refine their professional skills in order to better market themselves. In this respect, there's a number of considerations that students, educational institutions, and job seekers should consider. Companies place a high premium on educated, experienced, and versatile employees who are capable of contributing rapidly to the organization's success. Strong professional talent reduces training time and increases the organization's efficiency and saves them money. So while companies use a myriad of factors to evaluate job candidates, some of the key pieces in the hiring equation boil down to education, prior industry experience, technical skill, and quote-unquote polish. Employers are increasingly seeking candidates who exhibit not only the technical skill to perform a job, but also professional skills critical to success in a global corporate environment. So candidates who are capable of communicating effectively, for example, with diverse groups of professionals, managing projects, budgeting, have a strong work ethic, are more likely to succeed, and therefore more likely to gain interviews and job offers. In addition, another big change since 2002 is that companies have forged very strong relationships and partnerships with temp agencies to fill positions. So in talking to the companies, it's become clear that temp agencies offer them the ability to better evaluate performance and fit within the company's culture before offering a job candidate a full-time position. Temp agencies also offer some flexibility for the companies in terms of having a more scalable workforce so that they can better meet production demands. I've actually heard some estimates recently that if job seekers ignore temporary jobs and don't factor in jobs offered through temp agencies in their job search, they may be ignoring close to half of the opportunities that are available in the industry. North Carolina's educational institutions have come a long way in providing industry-targeted training that helps improve the marketability and utility of the new graduates. And much of this is because industry has been a very active player in making these changes happen over the years. So to talk more about the history of the biomanufacturing and pharmaceutical manufacturing cluster's involvement in workforce development initiatives here in the state, I'd like to introduce Bruce Kaylos, who chairs the Biotech Manufacturers Forum for NCBio. He's also a valuable voice of industry and is a key part of NCBioImpact. Prior to retirement, Bruce has had over 35 years of experience in an FDA-regulated industry. In 2008, he retired from Wyeth Biotech Vaccines facility in Sanford, where his 21-year career included various management roles, including Director of Manufacturing, Site Managing Director in Government and Industrial Affairs. He also served as Wyeth's liaison to state and local officials regarding matters related to the Sanford site and issues surrounding the biotech industry. So I turn it over to Bruce.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. I'd also like to thank Greg for his efforts in putting this together technically, and thank you all as audience for your time and interest. One of the things that I find to be very informative in these kinds of situations is to take a few minutes to look at the drivers behind the situations that got us to these points. John gave you a very good background of the cluster, what was in the cluster, how these areas are defined as far as job skills and requirements for degrees and things like that. But I'm going to step back just a little further at this point. Having been in the area and running the institutions at the time, or running the industry at the time, that the factors that we were facing in the trenches on a day-to-day basis. So in the mid to late 1980s, the central North Carolina and RTP areas were colonized by such industry trailblazers as Glaxo, Burroughs Wellcome, Cutter Laboratories, Abbott Laboratories, and Merck and Wilson. The business and market dynamics in these established organizations initiated rapid growth and technical diversity amongst these folks, and the arrival of numerous experienced scientists and business leaders. These individuals, these leaders, possessed a wealth of entrepreneurial spirit and innovative ideas in this rapidly expanding biotech and other similar areas. This ultimately led to the proliferation of numerous small startup companies with their own related scientific, business, and employment goals and objectives. The resource requirements of these established and startup entities, coupled with the state's economic development efforts that were generating an influx of other new and expanding biotechnology companies in the same time frame, placed a huge demand on the supply of experienced and trained personnel for operational and QC, engineering, maintenance, validation, and other broad-based vendor support required skills related to that growth. I think it's interesting also at this point to know that when you start talking about this, it's not just, as John mentioned a little bit ago, that it's operational or QC folks, but it's also back to your maintenance, your validation, all of the support activities that surround this that always do better if you have the scientific experience and knowledge to lend to the efforts on the shop floor or the research laboratory. So essentially, there's only a couple of places you can go to pick up this talent. And human resource shortages meant that employees had to be recruited from out of the state for some of the higher technical skills. And alternatively, internal to the state, we were recruiting from industries in the manufacturing and laboratory assignment areas that were related to the biotech industry. So you may have seen things out when you look at the environment that people operating in, the textile industry, the food industry, things like that. We're supplying good operational roles and being familiar with equipment and how to handle process operations and steps and unit operations, that sort of thing. But they virtually had no skill sets in the regulatory agencies or the primary foundational technical skills, even though these folks came to us with a very good mindset about day-to-day employment and operations in a facility. As a result, training these employees was to the standards that the companies needed with regards to those technical backgrounds and regulatory backgrounds was costly in terms of time and facility access. And by that I mean you can't just put a person into a shop floor situation with tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of valuable product in the line and have that person kind of figure out their way through the production. So you really have to have the time on the line to be able to teach these folks how to use the equipment and in a regulated environment. So the training associated with the sourcing strategy required extensive amounts of employee time and access to these critical manufacturing facilities and process. And this was all happening when there was a pressing health need to commercialize many of these products, which were first-in-class treatments in many cases. Okay, if we go to the next slide here. Okay, companies placed a high premium on the employees of similar operating companies, and especially, again, individuals with GMP and industrial scale equipment and process knowledge. This resulted in a continual bidding war amongst the employers, and you saw a seller's market, the employee market for being hired, high employee turnover rate for all of these organizations because they were moving to another offer at a similar place. And this, again, was both in the manufacturing, laboratory, and other support areas. You know, obviously, this was not a sustainable process, and with the strong potential and desire for biotech growth and expansion on the horizon in North Carolina, this practice was just not going to work on an ongoing basis. Even though the universities and community colleges had great foundational scientific technical degrees and programs, again, virtually none of these programs provided the specific applied training components from a technology transfer, manufacturing, and regulatory perspective. So how did we fix this? And I think it's important to note that the companies got together along with other institutions in the educational facets of the environment here in the central North Carolina area and decided to come up with a solution. I think that's a key, a very critical key to being successful to the level that we've been successful today. These companies banded together to think about a solution. At this point, they saw not only the benefits of that new growth, but also the challenges of having the requisite trained employee pool. Rather than building barriers amongst ourselves that would have ultimately isolated and stifled such growth, the executives from approximately 8 of these companies decided to meet, and this is in the late 1990s and early 2000s, to develop a solution. This group included names like Bayer, which is now Grifols, Biogen, now Biogen IDEC, Diasynth, now Fujifilm Diasynth, Novo Nordisk, Novozymes, and Wyeth, now Pfizer. And I think to take a little sidebar now, it's interesting as you go through that list to see the dynamics of the changes in company ownership and in focus and perspective. These things have been very dynamic, and they have been moving in a very positive direction, and a lot of interest in these areas and in the products that these companies make and in the capabilities that these companies have as we move into more complex situation where what used to be multiple different products are now coming together under one logo and being able to be grouped together, such as devices and biological products all rolled into one. So that's increasing the need for technically trained individuals. So getting back to the course of these meetings that the representative companies had, we defined the specific training needs and skill sets and ultimately the actual courses or certifications and degrees that would be addressed or be addressing the training requirements for these applied technologies in most of the common unit operations, such as laboratory testing, maintenance, validation categories. We concluded that to maximize the benefit, the training must include real-life exposure to the facility or to a surrogate facility that could effectively simulate the size and surroundings of a manufacturing environment. Additionally, this program as designed by its nature, also address the needs of critical service support sectors such as facility engineering, construction management, vendor-supplied equipment, materials, and other contracted functions. With the specifications of the training needs in hand, the group companies requested and received a series of meetings with the then president and staff of the University of the North Carolina system, and they were very interested in the essential features of the training program and leading the way in participating and helping develop the curriculum and courses. During this phase of the program development, a larger consortium of like-minded organizations was also coalescing. This expanded group consisted of representatives of the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, the North Carolina Biosciences Group, which is the trade organization, the Golden Leaf Foundation, which provided a lot of funding for the facilities that were constructed in response to this, and of course the university and community college department heads that were participating in developing these programs. There was also expanded industry membership, and we also closed the loop of the circle with the North Carolina Economic Development staff. The figure on this slide, as you see here, is one of the original conceptual diagrams showing the movements of students and incumbent employees throughout the educational and training programs. And this goes back to some of the things that John was pointing out earlier, is that everything doesn't have to go high school, community college, BS degree, and then into MS or PhD programs. You might find people in master's programs that want to come back and get hands-on solutions and experience to things and take courses in an operational basis at a facility like the Biotechnology Education Center on Centennial Campus or some of the community college situations. The output of this combined organization through grants, contributions of equipment and employer and instructor oversight and time, as well as legislative commitment to ongoing funding, produced the nascent but now rapidly developing world-class consortium that you would hear by the name NCBioImpact and all of its associated training centers of activity. I think you'll see this reflected in the programs and curriculum that we see today in the BTEC, the Biotechnology Education Center, the BRIGHT group, which is at NCCU and is focused on research, and BioNetwork in the community college groups that focus on a lot of the hands-on training John had spoken about as he defined the educational needs in the cluster explanation. Okay. So I'm going to turn it back over to John now. Thank you very much.
All right, so thanks, Bruce. I can talk a little bit more about NCBioImpact and some of the individual partners from the educational perspective. So yeah, as a result of strong industrial support, as well as support from state governmental leaders, initial funding to develop NCBioImpact was provided by the Golden Leaf Foundation, which handles the state's tobacco settlement money and funds projects showing the potential to strengthen the state's long-term economy. In addition to Golden Leaf funding, NCBioImpact has received approximately $13 million through in-kind donations of employee time and equipment from industry. In terms of the employee time contributions, you've got to remember that it was industry employees that provided much of the engineering, architectural, and equipment specification guidance that drove the development of the education facilities. And in addition to additional state funds for operating expenses, the educational partners have all received substantial grant funding to support research, training, and workforce development initiatives that they've got going on. So the education partners provide seamless education pathways, as we saw on the previous slide, that work for career changers, for students, for new graduates, and incumbent employees, and that's through degree and certificate programs, through customized training and professional development opportunities, through hands-on training in state-of-the-art facilities, and through capstone and specialized experiences for degree-seeking students at both the associate and bachelor's degree levels. And all this helps ensure the availability of workers within North Carolina at all talent and experience levels. So to provide a little bit more background on the three core education partners within NCBioImpact, I can start by talking about BTech, and housed at NC State's Centennial campus. BTech, or the Biomanufacturing Training and Education Center, is an 82,500 square foot bioprocessing plant. It's the only center of its kind in the nation that's dedicated to education and research. In addition to housing the community college's capstone center through shared space, it also houses a pilot scale cell culture and purification suite, intermediate scale unit operations, and a bioanalytical lab. BTech offers academic minors as well as cross-disciplinary professional science master's degree programs that combine technical training with industry experience and sort of business case studies. They've already held more than 80 short courses for local and national industry and served more than 900 professionals. In addition to serving North Carolina's industry, BTech also provides training for FDA inspectors as well as international organizations that are engaged in vaccine manufacturing initiatives. BioNetwork is the community college's bioscience workforce development initiative. It consists of 7 specialized centers, and it partners with the community college's associate degree programs, continuing education programs, and customized training programs to be the nation's largest network of education and training services for the bioscience industry. Programs are offered for students and employees, including short courses and degree programs. This includes hands-on training with industry equipment at the Capstone Center, which is located at BTech at NC State, as well as at the individual specialized centers, as well as on a recently launched mobile training unit, which is the 42-foot tractor-trailer style mobile laboratory that's on this slide, and that can train 16 people at a time on high-skilled tasks and biotech equipment. At North Carolina Central University, BRIGHT, or the Biomanufacturing Research Institute and Technology Enterprise, is a 52,000 square foot state-of-the-art research environment that houses laboratories and classrooms to support education and training with respect to analytical technology and drug development, QA, QC, and they also utilize a Biogen IDEC chemical library that contains over 350,000 compounds. BRIGHT offers bachelor's and master's degrees in pharmaceutical science, focusing on research critical to pharmaceuticals and biotechnology, as well as pursuing new research programs in drug discovery and manufacturing. And so in a nutshell, all this investment has been very successful. And there's a number of different ways that we can measure that success. First off, we can just look at the numbers in terms of just throughput, in terms of number of students. And looking at the number of students served, the slide provides some recent data with respect to graduates and trainees and companies served through NCBioImpact programs. Through its customized training program, BioNetwork, for example, has completed 168 custom training events that involve 39 of the state's 58 community colleges. North Carolina State graduates who have completed hands-on training are truly being sucked up by industry. 2011, BTech surpassed their building design enrollment target of 250 students per semester. So more than 95% of their graduates have been hired. This next slide is actually one of the more significant findings in the Window in the Workplace report. It is a nice sort of metric of success for the health of the local industry from a hiring standpoint in general. While there are many different factors at play in this, including the availability of NCBioImpact programs, as well as the state's sizable pool of experienced life science professionals, it's definitely significant. The companies in the cluster indicated they're able to fill approximately 90% of their open positions from within North Carolina. And this is a significant change even from going back a few years ago to 2008 when we asked the same question and looked at the same numbers. And back then, approximately 70% of jobs were hired from within the state. So despite the economy and despite the situation that we're in, they're hiring 90% of their folks from within North Carolina. And all this is important in contrast to the situation in the broader manufacturing industry in the state, which, as detailed in the recent State of the North Carolina Workforce Report, has some of the companies have indicated, speaking about manufacturing in general, that they have had difficulty finding talent with the right skills and have been forced to recruit workers from out of state. So it's nice to see that the bulk of the employers are finding the bulk of their employees from within state with respect to the biomanufacturing cluster. We can also measure success just in terms of companies that have set up shop in North Carolina since this has happened. All of the state's biomanufacturing and pharmaceutical manufacturing companies that have established, relocated, or expanded operations in North Carolina have specifically cited the state's workforce development capabilities as a major reason for their decision. These companies would include Novartis, who's quoted here, but also Merck up in North Durham, as well as Medicago. Another sort of metric of success that I like to look at is just simply the high percentage of instructional staff that comes from industry. So back in 2002, for example, many of the colleges and universities lacked the specialized subject matter expertise and industry experience required to develop effective industry-targeted programs. But in what's really been a great measure of success in my mind, and NCBioImpact educational partners have hired and continue to hire a lot of faculty and instructors with extensive experience in the biomanufacturing and pharmaceutical industry. And so strong ties have been forged with industry, and industry's happy with the quality and level of training that's being provided. And I'm actually going to turn it back over to Bruce now for a moment to talk more about the value that industry's placed on this training from an industry standpoint. So Bruce, back to you.
Thank you, John. The universities and community college systems, as we were generating these programs and growing them, obviously these became a bigger and bigger segment of their offerings, and of related costs to that grew as well. So we received the question through industry that said, well, what is the value that you're really getting off of these? How do you project that value and what it really means to you? Well, with so many different types of related industries, as John had mentioned earlier, we came up with what we called a value statement, and that's what you see on this slide. And I won't read it to you right now, but basically what it says is that the members of the organization, the Biotech Manufacturers Forum, recognize that the training was excellent and that the facilities truly represented a hands-on environment, a simulated environment that you would be seeing in a manufacturing scale operation. So because the students were able to focus on this and not worry about losing material or making a mistake, and the instructors that have put these programs together, many have had industrial experience and also have the regulatory background to be able to train them not only in the technical science, the applied manufacturing skills, but also the regulatory environment that's so important to us in getting these products out. So we were able to come up with a value statement that virtually all the members in the Biotech Manufacturers Forum signed off on and said, this is a good enough program in my perspective that we're going to treat this like it was hands-on experience if you'd had this for several months in some other company. So that was a great advantage at that point to be able to tell that to the educational systems. And it's also a great advantage for the industry as a whole, even industry members that haven't even come here yet, because it does three basic things. It creates an available pool of employees that when a new company moves, you have a readily available, instantly accessible pool of employees that you can start your programs with. It provides the individual, be they employees or students outside of the employee range, the capability for continuing their training. To move on to the next step in the ladder of their careers. And it also provides the industry with custom program training so that as we're bringing on a new product or a new technology that's important to getting critical healthcare solutions out to the public on a worldwide basis, we can do this very quickly and efficiently through either the long full semester courses or short courses that have been made available to us. So that's, I think, really key to looking at how this is being provided on an ongoing basis. And with that, I'll turn it back on over to John.
All right, thanks, Bruce. So finally, we can look a little bit about some of the current and future needs with respect to to where education, some of the things that education should focus on in terms of training needs moving forward. As previously discussed, companies located within the RTP commute shed have been able to readily fill 90% of their positions with candidates from here in state. Yet discussions back in 2008 and 2011 indicated that there's always room for improvement and better education and better availability of some workers. And so while broadening the scope of recruitment domestically and internationally is often unavoidable for some positions, it's still a costly endeavor, so any opportunity to find your folks in state is a good thing. So among the recruitment challenges that some of the companies have mentioned in talking to them over the years, finding qualified maintenance and instrumentation-related candidates has long been recognized as a challenge in the biomanufacturing and pharmaceutical manufacturing industry. And while some of the companies have indicated that this is still a challenge, others have managed to patch the problem, I guess, a little bit by forming strong relationships with military recruiting companies, as well as doing some heavy recruiting from the area's pool of maintenance contractors. But it is still just a patch, and I think there's room for improvement there. Second, as regulatory expectations are raised, there's a stronger demand for personnel with high levels of quality assurance, quality engineering, and internal auditing experience, and that was a need expressed by a number of the companies. In addition, companies are looking out of state for a lot of highly specialized engineering and scientist positions, and in some cases that's an unavoidable search. They're looking for a scientist that has a very specialized niche knowledge in developing a particular product or scaling up a particular process, and that may come only from their competitor who lives on the other side of the country. So it may be a narrow search, but there's always opportunity to look for improvement. In terms of training needs moving forward, so back in 2002, survey respondents agreed that the value they placed on experience in their industry comes mainly from simply being there, working in a GMP-regulated environment and learning how to apply GMP on the job and how their actions affect the process and the product. And this overarching need for a workforce with a stronger industry mindset laid the foundation for much of what has happened through NCBioImpact. And while we learned relatively little new information about training needs for the incumbent workers in recent discussions with industry, we learned a great deal from industry and with respect to what they're looking for in entry-level job candidates and where some needs and gaps along those lines. In the course of some of the discussions, it became clear that some of the most common reasons that candidates are turned down from jobs include not exhibiting a professional demeanor, dressing inappropriately, not asking questions that indicate they know the job's involved, and truly struggling through behavioral interview type questions. So as I mentioned earlier, it's really critical that job seekers and students continue to look for ways to refine their basic job search and market and self-marketing skills. In addition, employers are seeking an increasing high proportion of candidates that have basic knowledge in project management, in accounting, in enterprise-level systems such as SAP, which are becoming increasingly used by most of the companies as the companies become increasingly more global. And while Window in the Workplace, again, doesn't have a great deal of information about the incumbent worker training needs and skills, some of the center's past publications go into a lot greater detail on this. And so among these include Window in the Workplace 2003, as well as the Model Employee. The Model Employee in particular provides a solid introduction to the knowledge, skills, competencies, and career progression patterns for 6 entry-level jobs in the biomanufacturing cluster. And so finally, I'd like to close by calling attention to, speaking of model employees, I'd like to call attention to a solid example of, a nice product of NCBioImpact. This is Selena Durant's. Selena started working 12 hours nighttime swing shifts at Novo Nordisk's Clayton facility in early 2012. She transitioned out of the military and had a number of different jobs over the years since that transition. But after losing her previous job due to efficiency-driven downsizing, Selena's passion, determination, and a little bit of luck landed her into a wake tech classroom, and ultimately got her a job. In addition to taking BioWork, she completed more courses in validation in microbiology and aseptic gowning through BioNetwork's Capstone Center, and now has nearly completed a validation specialist certificate program. And so I'll leave it there, and I'll open things back up to any of the questions that were raised at this point.
Okay, John, we have some questions now that have been submitted. If you would like to go ahead and read and answer the questions, whichever one of the two of you are appropriate, that would be great.
In terms of the first question on how the economic downturn, globally has affected North Carolina's industry, I think I hinted at it on some of the earlier slides, but it's basically just driven a high premium on efficiency across all companies, and I think that's a change that's allowed industry to find ways where they can in many ways reduce headcounts and get things done with less people. I don't think that's a trend that is going to go back, meaning they've realized they can do things more efficiently, and I think it's a change that's been made. But I think those are issues that are not particular to the biomanufacturing sector in particular. I think it's an issue that affects all industries. Bruce, I don't know if you had any other comments on that first question.
Just a quick one. The industry today is looking, as John said before, for more well-rounded employees, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to have 2 other degrees with that. It just means, again, your mindset on how you approach your job. So if you're looking at a good term, it would be an agile or flexible employee. So every time you're looking for an opportunity, if there's another section that's opened in the plant, or there's another unit operation that is looking for people, or you can spend some time going from manufacturing into the QC laboratories or vice versa. Those are the kinds of things that are going to make you more agile and valuable to the company, and it also allows the company, you a chance to progress, and the company a chance to be able to say, I can flex my workforce from one area to another as demands change, with more products coming in and being segmented into production runs. Then you're going to have people that are available to available knowledge, with the available knowledge to be able to do more of those different types of production runs. So that's how you manage to stay valuable in those kinds of situations.
Number 2, I'm definitely not the best person to answer a question with respect to the latest developments in sort of ag biotech with respect to drug discovery. It's not an area that's a strong suit by any means, but I can look at it. Bruce, if you had any comment there.
Well, several things. As John had pointed out before earlier in the skill set requirements, many of these things that you're learning how to do in these seminars and programs and curriculum are going to be usable across variable fields. You may not have the exact same regulatory requirements or things like that, but the basic technology behind it in a manufacturing experience would be helpful. When you're looking at saying how are the latest developments in ag, bio, and pharma and biopharma for new drug discoveries going today, I need to point no further than to Medicago, which is a new startup in the RTP area, which is making viral-like components in tobacco plants. And they are making influenza vaccines and have been into mid and late stage clinical trials with this. And so here in a 6-week period of time, you don't have to worry about hundreds of thousands of eggs and doing all of that. You put this in the tobacco plant. They have a huge warehouse type of situation that it's automated, and they grow the tobacco plants in that. They're harvested, ground up, and the virus-like particles extracted and purified, and there you go. So much more reduced cycle time for some of the vaccine potential products that you can see. So you're seeing this again, as I mentioned before. You're putting biotechnology products on a stent for a heart patient. You're putting anticoagulants onto certain I'm sorry, not anticoagulants, but bone growth stimulants into certain plates and fibers that you're trying to correct fractures with to expedite the bone growth. So there's more and more of this kind of crossover. What used to be 10 years ago considered separate areas in the medical or biotechnology range, they're melding together. That's going to be one of our biggest challenges in the future, not only on a manufacturing, but even on a clinical and how you regulate these types of things. So a lot of, you're getting in right at the very start of that type of companion type products, if you will.
So next, I guess the question was raised. I guess Norm, you had asked about how many microbreweries there are in North Carolina, and on average, the number of employees at these companies, and I don't have that number off the top of my head. I received a note from one of our librarians who mentioned that it's a list that we can pull relatively easily, so we should be able to get that data.
And John, if there's any of these questions that we don't have the answers to, we can post those along with our archived video, so we can get that information and make it available to folks as they want to watch it later on. Okay, terrific. But I have heard anecdotally that it's a mix of small and large companies. So yeah, you've got companies like Sierra Nevada that are building out in Western North Carolina, and that'll be a sizable operation with a decent workforce need. But there are also a number of these companies that are very small operations and maybe running out of somebody's garage, and it's not a strong workforce need. So I think more work needs to be done in understanding the workforce needs within that sort of microbrewery cluster. In terms of any sort of industry-age standard for earning entry-level credentials that a student can earn, and could these credentials be offered to high school students via career technical education courses? So this has always been a challenging issue. I mean, in terms of age standard, I mean, industry's looking for people that are over the age of 18 to be in the workforce. While the educational profiles that I showed on one of the earlier slides show people employed with a high school diploma and not much else beyond that, it's not a job that it's not something that companies are seeking a lot of right now. And most of those people that may have a high school degree, a lot of them in many cases have either been there for many years and they're bringing some transferable skill from another industry, or in the cases of some of the more recent hires, they may have come from the military or some other place where they've gained some professional skill, some polish, and some sort of general work ethic. So it's challenging to find the right solution so that somebody can come out of high school with the skills they need to go straight into a job in these companies. And with the economy like it is, it's not a. My hunch is that they would not be very employable, and they would be outcompeted by the other degree students. That's not to say that career tech ed, shouldn't be doing something. And I know there's several programs within several of the the program areas within CTE that focus on biomanufacturing, and there are several modules in the classrooms now. And those modules are great because I think that the key job at this point is to stimulate career interest and get people excited about careers in the industry or in manufacturing in general. I think there's a need to build excitement and interest in both at sort of the student level and as well as at their parents. And looking at question number 5, Bruce, do you have any way of addressing that?
Well, is VC money needed to keep this cluster alive and healthy? If so, do we have adequate resources? I think that, like most things, there's about 50 facets to the answer to this question. Is the money needed to keep this cluster alive and healthy? Not necessarily when you're looking at the larger manufacturers who have adequate resources, and so that certainly it keeps you stable for this period of time. But if you don't have that investor money available, then what you're doing is you're reducing the potential for the future and new products that are coming on down the line. So yes, that money is always necessary because there are so many new product potential items out there that are being investigated now. And as I think most of us know that, the percentage that actually gets to market is not huge, but if you reduce the percentage you're working on, likely as not, you will reduce the percentage that get to the marketplace. So in the long term, yes. And if so, do we have adequate resources? I'm probably not the best one to determine that right now. Money is very tight out there at this point, to my understanding. But it's now we'll have to see how the economy looks in the next couple of years, and if that starts to rebound, I'm sure you'll find this to grow again. If nothing else, the healthcare industry, as we start to look at all of the associated Medicare, Medicaid, and other programs that are striving for efficiency and cost reductions, one of the ways to do that is with some of these new biological products and pharma products. So these things have to keep rolling down the pike, or in order to be effective to help reduce future costs. And if I can give you a biological product once a month or once a week that keeps you out of a hospital bed for a week at a time, there is a good cost-benefit analysis that goes along with that. So that's the thing. I think we have to bring this back up into the introductory level as quickly as possible to keep the potential for the future moving. But the lack of DC now would probably not affect the established commercial people that you see employed now.
Yeah, one other comment, just real quick, is somebody had mentioned a sort of a comment in private about just wondering and wanting to make sure that these hiring concerns and sort of this need for increased professional skill and polish is being relayed to job candidates, and that is being handled in a number of ways. And one of those is through the Window in the Workplace report itself, through this webinar, and trying to reach the educators. And it's really the job of the educators to put some programs in place that really try and enhance opportunities where students and job seekers can develop these skills. In addition, the North Carolina Biotechnology Center recently launched a job networking group for life science professionals, and so not so much looking at the entry-level candidate, but looking at the more experienced candidate. That's definitely a recurring theme in those meetings, is this sort of trying to build that professional skill base. And so, Greg, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, and I wanted to add too, since you took the opportunity to add that, the North Carolina BioNetwork through the community college system has created some of these IETs, interactive educational technologies, that actually help assist students in becoming more polished with their interviewing skills, with their resume writing skills, and some of the other soft skills that are necessary now to be able to land those jobs. And you can find those at our website at NCBioNetwork.org. And we've also even done past BioForums on some of the skills that will help job seekers get these jobs with these companies. And not just get these jobs, but retain these jobs, even if they're changing jobs. It helps in that polishing process for employees. So, I agree that that's something that we all need to work on a little bit better to make sure that our workforce is top-notch in the state of North Carolina. I want to thank you guys again for doing our webinar today. You can find out about other BioForum events also by visiting our website, NCBioNetwork.org. Keep in mind our 2013 calendar is currently being filled and finalized, so be sure to frequent our website for future programs that we have coming up next year. I'd like to thank you again, John and Bruce, for today's presentation, and thank you, attendees, for your time and participation. This concludes our webinar today, and on behalf of all of us at North Carolina BioNetwork, thank you and have a great day.